All right. So, what does Victor think about Polish fascism? The Poles are fascists. They have decided to hate all non-white people and possibly women.
Um, to the rest of Europe, go fuck yourself.
Well, there's a typical Polish fascist response for you there, resorting to swear words and name calling.
I did not name call anyone.
Yeah, you did. I heard you. So therefore, you did.
Oh, of course, yes. Yes.
So, fascist, how are you going to defend your fascist comrades?
Yeah, it's called This is Complete and Utter Bullshit.
Oh, I don't know if it's complete and utter bullshit. Poland
Alright,
currently is governed by a very right-wing government, which is not particularly fond of immigrants.
alright, fine. There is a fair amount of well, I shouldn't even say fair. There's some truth to it, and there is a chance Poland is going to slip further and further down a right-wing fascist or even imperialistic road. But this is being pushed more by the liberal governments in the rest of Europe and their press than actually Poland itself.
Well, yes, the fact is, while the Law and Justice Party is definitely on the fringe of the right wing of Europe, it isn't, at least it publicly isn't, anywhere near fascism.
Yes. No, the thing is a good portion of this is a case of the press reporting one thing and not reporting the other part. Like, for example, Poland didn't want to take any of the migrants. That was reported as Poland being incredibly racist.
Well,
Uh,
yes, aren't you racist fascists for not wanting to accept your share as agreed upon by the Germans of the migrants?
but Poland didn't have a say in that decision for the main migrant issue. And before, not that long ago, Poland was really wanting help with all of the Ukrainian refugees that were coming in from the war that's going on right next to it and received nothing.
Well, I don't know if it received nothing, just not a lot.
Not a lot, and none of the other countries, as far as I'm aware, at least Germany, for example, took in the Ukrainian refugees. In fact, I think there was even a recent story where Germany has now denied all Ukrainian refugees and asylum seekers.
Well, they are could be fascists. Remember, Ukraine is full of fascists.
Yeah, and the migrants from the Middle East could be terrorists. What's your point?
Well, they're Middle Eastern refugees who need to be looked after. The Ukrainians are evil white fascists and racists.
No, they're not. But that's the
Look,
thing.
there's been numerous news stories about how the Ukrainian conflict has involved fascists who have sided against the Russians.
Yeah, there have been some neo-Nazi groups that have been fighting against the Russians, but they're definitely a minority. The whole reason that the rebellion in Ukraine started was because of Ukraine's desire to join the very multicultural European Union.
Well, obviously, so they could infiltrate it with fascists.
Yeah, that doesn't make logical sense. The whole idea that there was Ukrainian fascists was largely Russian propaganda bullshit, which certain news anchors from Russia today resigned over, and just an excuse on why Western Europe shouldn't involve itself in Ukraine and kind of help wave away the Russians annexing Crimea and now effectively eastern Ukraine.
Well, yes, I mean, you don't want to help fascists. And you don't have to help fascists. And if
Yes,
they're all fascists, then they don't deserve your help.
yes, but the same argument.
Also, if they're fascists, then any complaints they have about that your current migrant policy is insane is also wrong because they're fascists and they're just saying it because they're racist.
Wow, that what logical fallacy
Uh
Paul there? Hmm? What?
oh. You just hiccuped on my end.
Oh, well, what kind of straw men are there? I mean, sorry, logical fallacies. There's straw men, um, false cause. I mean, no, these arguments are terrible, and it's made even worse by this cherry picking of information. As I said, well, in a way, look, I would be lying if um Poland's desire not to have any migrants in Poland was completely motivated by being pissed off about not getting much help over the Ukrainian issue. But it's definitely a factor. And leaving that out just makes Poland look like racist assholes.
Well, yes, and if they're racist assholes, you can ignore their comments about how they disagree with your refugee policy.
Yeah. Just like also recently, where Sweden did something completely insane. It grabbed, I think it was about 13 Polish people visiting Sweden, most of whom visiting for seemingly tourist reasons, and is claiming that they were planning to blow up a migrant center and have ties to neo-Nazi groups, which, as far as I'm aware, Sweden has yet to disclose any proof of this or an explanation why a Polish neo-Nazi group would travel all the way to Sweden to attack a migrant center.
They love the bracing northern weather.
Yeah. Like not Austria, Germany. No, we're going to go all the way to Sweden to attack a migrant center? And as far as I have heard, most of these people are just tourists with no obvious neo Nazi ties whatsoever.
Well, now, to be fair, we haven't heard the evidence on what they were doing. So, presumably, when the Swedes come out with the evidence, we will know if they are, well, we'll have a better idea if they are tourists or tourist terrorists.
Yeah, when the government of Poland demands to see the evidence, or any government demands to see the evidence for why their nationals are being held, you kind of want to give an explanation.
Well, it might be a good idea.
Yes. Otherwise, this looks really like Sweden wanted to do some distracting in claiming that there's evil Poles. Well, there's a Polish conspiracy to destroy the migrant centers and arrested a bunch of innocent people as scapegoats. And the worst part is, this has barely been reported outside of Poland, even though any other country that would have 13 of its nationals arrested on these charges would make headline news throughout all of Europe.
Well, they're Polish fascists. And everybody knows that Poland is full of fascists. After all, that's where Auschwitz was.
Yes, with certain comments. Well, there's the other thing. With all of the talk about Poland being fascist, the government did something, again, remarkably stupid because, well, it's an extreme government, has proposed a law saying that you can no longer say Poland has had aided in any way the Nazis in World War II. And then that's been reported largely not as Poland doing something stupid because of all the bullshit comments it's had about its being fascist, but apparently because it just doesn't like concentration camps that were located in Poland being called Polish concentration camps.
Well, it doesn't like them being called Polish concentration camps.
No, it doesn't, but that's not the main reason for this, albeit stupid, law.
Yes, because technically a lot of countries collaborated with the Nazis after the Nazis had defeated and occupied them. And arguably the Poles were one of the ones which rose up the quickest as soon as they saw any opportunity to do it, so, and then got punished horribly for doing so, as the Soviets stopped their advance to allow the Poles to be massacred.
Yeah. But this is the thing, right? Like, whatever Poland does, it's constantly reported. If it's reported, it's skewed to make Poland look far worse than it already is. And this is going to have huge repercussions for Europe and international affairs. They're basically exploiting the Google Translate, and most people cannot read Polish. So they can't know what Poland is saying.
Well, I mean, they can see what Poland is saying, because apparently Poland just put out a major magazine in Poland just put out a lovely issue, which has a picture of a lovely white European woman draped in the flag, having the flag being ripped off her by the hands of dark-skinned men.
Yes. However, the problem with this is, like, even the places that are reported, like Breitbart and Rebel Media, right, aren't really reporting on the contents of the story. They're just reporting they've done it, but they themselves do not seem to know what the contents actually are beyond the headlines they've translated, and are probably still trying to translate it. And this is a language barrier, as I said, it's basically being exploited to make Poland look as terrible as possible and justify some actions like by the Swedish government to arrest Polish nationalism on charges that are very hard to believe. I should say nationalists, Polish nationalists. But yes.
Polish nationals.
Nationals, yes. That's the term.
Just say Polish citizens.
Yeah, citizens.
Look, yes, all we really know, other than the Swedes have accused them of planning to bomb an immigration center, is that they are Polish citizens.
Yeah, and as far as I'm aware, the Swedish government has not provided the Polish government with evidence on explaining why they believe these Poles were going to do this. And you can also see that Sweden is wrong in the sense of, if this was really a group of crazy Poles wanting to bomb a migrant center, right, and they were all guilty, this would be a huge story in Europe. This would be showing the extent the far right is going, and you'd see things like evidence of their Facebook posts declaring that they were going to destroy this migrant center, say as a symbol to get the Swedish people to rise up or some bullshit. Right? But none of that has happened. If anything, the story has basically been swept aside.
Okay.
And this does have international repercussions because while the European countries are being massive dicks, Russia has been whispering into Poland's ear with things like, look how decadent the rest of Europe has gotten. We're going through the same thing. After all, we have this poor Russian girl that was effectively groomed to be sold for sex. And the Germans police don't want to do anything about it or admit that it's happened. Are you really sure you're on the right side of this, Poland?
Yeah, but the Poles really hate the Russians.
Yes, they really hate the Russians. But the thing is, for Poland and this kind of anti-Polish propaganda bullshit, this is pretty scary. And part of the reason this government, this far-right government, was elected in the first place wasn't because Polish people are naturally fascist or anything, or right-wing. It was because of the mass fear of a Russian invasion. The more these things are being published, and well, a lot of people don't know Polish. A lot of Polish people can understand English or will get it rewritten about what the other people have said. The more and more the Poles are going to start thinking that if it comes to another war with the Russians, they're going to get screwed like they were in World War II.
Well, it is traditional.
Well, it's traditional, and it's not even that far-fetched with a bunch of politicians trying to argue things like that if a certain country was attacked in Europe, mainly the Baltic states, that really it didn't mean all of NATO needed to go to war.
Yeah. Yes, there have been certain countries who have been effectively signaling that they do not plan to back up NATO's security guarantees.
Yeah. And as this is basically going, as statements about not backing up security guarantees, this propaganda to make Poland look like neo-Nazi racist crazy people keeps going, and the Russians are basically able to whisper in Poland's ears and go, see, look, the more it's becoming possible that the Polish government is just going to cut a deal with the Russians.
As I say, it's difficult to see the Poles. Well, they might cut a deal with the Russians. It's hard to see them siding with the Russians.
Poland is never going to be the allies of Russia. But to cut a deal on Ukraine, for example, or even things like Sweden and other things, Poland would probably be willing to do it to escape a Russian invasion.
Yes, if they truly feel that NATO is not going to back them up, then yes, they might actually cut a deal.
Yes. I mean, the thing is, like, these criticisms, people can tell are complete bullshit there. They can tell, well, something is definitely wrong with European nations want to put sanctions on Poland for not taking the migrants when they wouldn't take the Ukrainian migrants. The European governments are trying to use Poland as a scapegoat under the true premise that no one cares about Poland. However, they're forgetting the strategic reality that Poland is in an important position in Europe and is basically one of the main rocks against Russian aggression. If Poland starts cutting deals with Russia, that's the end of Ukraine, the Baltic states, possibly Sweden.
Well, I could see the Russians possibly occupying Gotland. It would have to go pretty far before they actually try and take out Sweden.
They might also have some help. Look, another dimension to this is the Swedish government has been massive assholes to the point where Finland, another country that hates the Russians more than anything, has basically been bypassing the international sanctions on Russia, signing deals with the Russians, and has been really pissed off with Sweden's actions, like all the migrants they ended up with because Sweden wasn't able to control the borders. You know, the migrants Finland didn't want and is not a part of the European Union. And so nothing the European Union said could have forced them to it. Just their border with Sweden up to this point has been largely not that well defended as the border with Russia.
The Finnish border with Russia is one of the... Short of the border between North and South Korea, is pretty much the most defended border.
Actually, I'd argue it's even more well defended than the border with North and South Korea. The Finns practically have chemical weapons ready to deploy to defend that border.
Yeah, and the Koreans have nuclear weapons to deploy to defend that border.
Okay, those shitty things the North Koreans have created, if they could even get there.
No, you're just wrong on this one. The entire border between North and South Korea is lined with minefields, artillery pieces, rocket possessions.
Whatever, but it's besides the point. Fine, maybe I'm wrong, whatever. Still, it's one of the world's most well-defended borders. But here's the thing with Sweden. Sweden is fucking with Poland right now for no other reason than Poland disagrees with it. Sweden is effectively telling Russia, nanner, 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 we've put troops now on Gotland, all 500 of them, and in order to get to us, you'd have to go through Finland. So, fuck you, you're never going through Finland to get to us. Neener, neener, neener. And they're going to Finland going, we don't really have to do any of this stuff because your economy depends on us and blah, 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 blah. Take your own share of migrants. Oh, you don't want the migrants? Well, maybe the Finns are just being racist. Neener, neener, neener. Someone is going to punch Sweden in the face.
Yes, but the problem that the Finns and the Poles have is any major Russian invasion goes through them.
Yeah, that is the problem. But Poland at this point, if Sweden tries to join NATO, is going to block Sweden from joining NATO. There's no way in heck Poland is going to let Sweden join NATO after this. Not with a lot of groveling and apologies. The Russians are looking for an easy fight.
Victor, the entire broadcast dropped out.
Oh.
It's been dropped out for the past couple minutes.
I had no idea. It says live on my end.
Oh, yeah, it said live, and then the connection dropped. I'm not even sure exactly how this will record.
Stop and start again.
No point doing that. This goes up no matter what.
So just keep going.
Yes. I mean,
All right.
I'm not even sure what dropped.
But anyways, Russia's looking for an easy fight to prove how uber and awesome it is. And Finland fucking hates Sweden.
Yes, but there's no easy fight about Sweden. That's a major operation, even if they face no resistance whatsoever.
Yeah, it's a major operation.
Also, the Russians have a vast amount of their military effort and money tied up in Syria right now.
Fair enough, but still, this is not current actions that are going to happen, but I'm just saying they're setting things up in the future that is going to look dark because Poland is one of the main armies and militaries in NATO, and they're pushing it to cut a deal with the Russians. Sweden has no military and is basically being a massive dick.
No, Sweden does have a military. How effective they currently are is up for debate.
Not a military that can win anything.
Well, maybe we'll find out, but I think probably not.
Still, this is all setting up a very dangerous situation in Eastern Europe, where Poland was one of the NATO powers that was rising and raising its military, and the others still have been more or less cutting back. And if Poland cuts a deal with Russia, Poland isn't going to have to worry about a Russian invasion as much, but the rest of Europe is. And they're not going to be able to count on Polish help anymore.
Well, once again, the Poles have the problem that any Russian invasion of actual mainland Europe has to go through Poland.
Or not completely through Poland. They have an out through Belarus, but
no, they don't. Belarus leads directly into Poland.
No, there's a way you could probably do it, but still, yes.
You have to go all the way down and around through the mountains of the Balkans.
Yes, the mountains through the Balkans, yes. You'd have to go all the way around, but yes, the most direct route is from Poland.
I mean, yes, you could come in through southeastern Europe, but that means going through Romania and its mountains, into more mountains, and around, lots of notification and easy spots for ambushes. The route into Europe is through the plains of Poland.
Yes.
It's also why it is almost certain Poland will never cut a deal which involves allowing the Russians to invade Europe.
Unless they get really, really angry.
No. Unless they absolutely believe that the entirety of NATO is going to lose, and their only hope for survival is to bow down and kiss the Russians' feet again, that's not going to happen.
Yeah, but that's the key word there. They have to actually believe it. And the Europeans are doing everything possible to make them think that's going to happen.
No, there is nothing that indicates that's going to happen. There is nothing which would currently make the Poles believe that they have to become the slaves of the Russians again.
Yeah, there is.
No.
Yeah, actually, yeah, there is. Look, these governments have become, from a certain Polish point of view, we'll go with, these governments have become like the treacherous governments that were ruling Poland and the other Eastern countries. They're
The
drawing.
Americans still have nuclear weapons.
Can you let me finish? Let me just explain. Right? They're acting, and the press agencies are acting like the old Eastern European governments. They're drawing down their armies. They are basically, through a certain perspective, committing suicide, letting in all of these refugees in without actually putting in any law and order. Especially from the far right perspective, the rest of Europe is incredibly weak and pathetic. You're right. There's still the United States with their nuclear arsenal, as well as Britain and France. At the same time, if they believe that they're not going to use them, and the United States elects a president that the Poles don't believe in, things are fucked. Hello?
Yeah, I'm
Okay.
waiting for you to finish.
I did finish.
All right. None of this means that the Poles believe that the Russians can successfully conquer the entirety of Europe and hold it.
Not hold it, but beat the
Then
living fuck out
why
of
would
them.
the Poles agree to effectively kiss the Russians' ass and become their slaves?
Not become their
Voluntarily.
slaves, but let the Russian army through, maybe.
Which means they're kissing the Russians' ass and becoming their slaves.
Not necessarily.
You allow the Russians to come
Yes,
in.
I know what reality
Now
is.
you're interrupting me.
Sorry.
No. If you agree, and the Poles understand this well enough for their history, if they allow the Russians to travel through Poland with their army, that means the Russian army enters Poland.
Yes, but
And the best case scenario is the Russians leave a relatively light governing force over them, and they're seen as the traitors which sided with the Russians throughout the rest of history.
yeah,
Best case scenario.
But at the same time, if they think they're going to lose anyways, it might not. It'd be preferable to losing a third of the population of Poland again.
They're Poles. You really think they will not fight the Russians if they believe the Russians are going to try and occupy them again?
If the rest of Western Europe is basically not helping, yeah, I think there's a good chance of it.
No, the Poles are not going to volunteer for slavery again. Not when they believe there's any chance that they will the Russians will be defeated or that they will eventually be liberated.
Yeah, I'm not that sure about that. But either way, still, this is the other point of that these European countries have gotten a license to be assholes because of this belief that Poland has to defend the border no matter what, so they can be as big dicks as they want to be.
Yes, but the thing is, they're right. The Poles do have to defend the border pretty much no matter what. They can cut deals over Ukraine. They can cut deals even to back the Russians in certain other matters. But the one thing the Poles can never, ever do is allow the Russian military to freely cross the Polish frontier.
Yeah, I'm not that sure about that. Now, a lot of people in Poland do not. While you're right, they don't want to be slaves of the Russians again. They also don't want to go through all the terror that went through basically being conquered. And if they believe they can get much better treatment or even maintain their independence like Yugoslavia did, they'll do it. You're right, that's not realistic, but it comes down to what
It
people
is obviously not realistic. The Russian invasion of Western Europe is not realistic in the first place. And that they wouldn't be effectively occupied and dominated by the Russians as soon as they allowed the Russians to march their troops through is also not realistic.
Well, we can discuss more about potential World War III late another time, but still, you can agree, though, that these actions are not good for the fate of NATO, for example, and that they're basically being massive assholes.
No, the big threat here is that effectively the coalition to sanction Russia will just fall apart. The European Union will get progressively weaker and weaker and may fall apart, and that the NATO alliance will be significantly weakened.
Yes.
No, it's effectively the Western Europeans have opened up a very effective power play for the Russians to do during this period in which they need to make some effective power plays.
Yes.
And no, the Poles, as per usual, are stuck in the center.
Yeah.
Where they have to deal with both sides, and both sides can treat them like crap.
That's true. But this is still posturing and positioning themselves for things and leading up to, at the very least, this is opening the road for the Russians to divide Ukraine fully and possibly invade the Baltic.
It'll have to get a little worse before they can effectively invade the Baltic states.
Yeah, well, the European nations like Germany have definitely put their pedal to the metal on it. Like, look, overall, the propaganda that's been spewing out has been getting to ridiculous levels. Like, there's been a series of articles now published about how Angela Merkel might be named United Nations Secretary because she's
Secretary
so awesome.
General?
Secretary General, yes.
Well, she needs a fallback position since there's a decent chance she won't be German Chancellor for that much longer.
Yeah, but there's almost no chance Moon is going to step down from the position since he only recently got it. And
he's been there for a little while now.
A little while, but I don't think he's leaving anytime soon or has been putting a call out for his successor. No, they're just doing it to try and prop up her on how great she is when her popularity in Germany has dropped to abysmal levels.
Yes, and that's the other thing that the Poles can wait for. The fact is, a lot of the current governments in Western Europe are going to start losing elections.
Yes.
And unless they handle their internal policing difficulties, they're going to lose them badly.
Yes. But there goes to the ultimate thing of the biggest problem with all of this is, you're right, so long as the Polish government was acting and controlled by irrational leaders, this would be fine. Poland would do the sensible thing of waiting for the outcome of the American election, as well as waiting for the outcome of these elections and just being patient. And wouldn't do things like try and ban someone saying that Poland helped the Nazis.
Yes, but I've said perfectly well that this government may very well cut a deal with Russia over the Ukraine, even possibly carve off a chunk for Poland itself.
Yes.
I still don't see how this leads to the Poles inviting the Russians to base their troops inside Poland for an invasion of Western Europe.
Fair enough. But either way, that's the thing. They're pushing the Polish government at a time when the Polish government really isn't led by someone that isn't that rational. They might not do the rational things like wait to see these governments fall in elections.
Well, now, if you actually listen to the interviews with the Polish ministers, especially the foreign minister who can actually speak English,
Yes.
he is, while definitely on the right side of the spectrum, he
Is a
talks
rational
like a
human
sane,
being.
sensible, and rational human being.
Yes. No, that's true. That's not everyone in his government is. But either way, we've beaten this topic to death.
Mm-hmm. Yes, so we can now conclude that the Poles are fascists.
Okay, but
Bye.